Imagine standing on a coastline that doesn't exist anymore. Beneath the waves of the North Sea, the Persian Gulf, and countless modern coastlines lies a lost world where humans hunted mammoths, crossed vanished continents, and watched the greatest transformation in human history unfold. As the Ice Age ended, glaciers melted, oceans rose, entire landscapes disappeared, and the foundations of civilization were quietly laid. The cities we live in, the rivers that feed nations, even the shape of the modern world can all be traced back to this ancient turning point. Before we uncover how the end of the Ice Age created the world we know today, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy deep history, ancient mysteries, and the forgotten stories hidden beneath our modern world. Now, let's travel back to a time when ice ruled the Earth. The world looks strangely familiar, yet utterly alien. Stand on the edge of what is now the North Sea and there is no sea at all. Instead, a vast plain stretches toward the horizon, crossed by rivers and dotted with herds of animals. Walk from Siberia toward Alaska, and there is no need for a boat. A broad expanse of land connects Asia and North America. Much of northern Europe lies beneath towering walls of ice. Across Canada, glaciers rise so high and spread so far that they seem less like frozen rivers and more like a second continent resting upon the first. This is Earth near the height of the last ice age, roughly 20,000 years ago. It is not a world on the verge of civilization. There are no cities, no farms, no written records, no monuments visible from space. Yet the forces shaping this frozen planet are quietly preparing the foundations of everything that will come later. The modern world, with its coastlines, nations, agricultural heartlands, trade routes, and population centres, has not yet been created. Much of it still lies hidden in the future. What makes this moment so remarkable is that the landscapes familiar to billions of people today do not yet exist. The English Channel is largely dry land. The Persian Gulf is not a gulf but a broad valley. Southeast Asia extends far beyond its modern shores. Entire countries that people now take for granted occupy spaces that are either underwater, frozen, or physically connected to neighbouring regions in ways that seem impossible from a modern map. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. The Ice Age is often imagined as a single endless winter, but the reality is more complex. For nearly the last 2.6 million years, Earth has existed within a geological period marked by repeated swings between colder and warmer climates. Massive ice sheets expand, temperatures fall, sea levels drop. Then, over thousands of years, the climate shifts again. Ice retreats, temperatures rise, seas advance inland. The last great glacial maximum represents one of the coldest chapters within that much longer story. At its peak, enormous ice sheets covered much of North America and northern Europe. In some places, the ice was several kilometers thick. Imagine standing where modern-day Chicago now sits and looking upward at a frozen mass taller than many mountain ranges. The sheer weight of this ice pressed the Earth's crust downward. Entire regions sagged beneath the burden. The climate was colder, but perhaps even more important was how much water became trapped inside glaciers. Oceans around the world lost vast quantities of water to these continental ice sheets. Sea levels fell by more than 100 meters compared to today. The consequences of that drop were extraordinary. Coastlines migrated outward for hundreds of kilometers. Continental shelves emerged from beneath the waves. New landscapes appeared where modern maps show only ocean. Life adapted to these conditions in countless ways. Across the Mammoth Steppe, a gigantic ecosystem stretching from Western Europe across Northern Asia into North America, cold-adapted animals thrived. Mammoths wandered through grasslands. Woolly rhinoceroses grazed on hardy vegetation. Reindeer migrated in immense numbers. Predators followed. Cave lions, wolves, and other hunters moved through a world that was harsh but surprisingly productive. Human beings were part of this ecosystem. They were not passive observers. They survived in environments that would challenge even modern societies. Small groups moved across enormous territories, tracking seasonal resources, following animal migrations, and adapting to constantly shifting conditions. Their technologies were simple by modern standards, but their understanding of the landscape was profound. A person living 20,000 years ago would possess knowledge that few people today could match. They would know where herds crossed rivers during particular seasons. They would recognize subtle weather patterns. They would understand which plants could be eaten during difficult years and which valleys provided shelter when conditions turned dangerous. Survival depended on memory, observation, and cooperation. Yet despite their resilience, Ice Age humans lived within limits imposed by the environment. Growing seasons were shorter. Many regions remained inaccessible beneath ice. Water was locked away in glaciers. Habitable land existed, but it was distributed differently than today. Entire populations concentrated in ecological refuges where resources remained dependable. What survives in the archaeological record suggests that these communities were remarkably adaptable. They developed sophisticated hunting strategies. They created tools from stone, bone, and antler. They produced art that still astonishes modern viewers. Deep inside caves, they painted animals with extraordinary skill. They carved figures, crafted ornaments, and left evidence of symbolic thought that feels unmistakably human across the gulf of millennia. Yet for all their creativity, they could not know what was coming. Far above them, invisible changes were already underway. Tiny shifts in Earth's orbit altered how sunlight reached the planet. Complex feedback systems involving ice, oceans, and the atmosphere began to respond. The climate machine that had helped create this frozen world was gradually moving toward a new state. At first, the changes were subtle. A slight increase in warmth here, a modest retreat of ice there. No single generation would have perceived the full transformation. The evidence remains incomplete. But what scientists can reconstruct suggests a process that unfolded across centuries and millennia rather than human lifetimes. For those living through it, the changes may have appeared as small alterations in familiar landscapes. A valley becomes greener. A glacier retreats from a distant ridge. A river carries more water than before. Animals begin appearing in places where they had once been rare. These might seem like local events. In reality, they are the first signals of one of the greatest environmental transformations in human history. The ending of the Ice Age is not merely a climatic episode, it is a planetary reorganization. As temperatures rise, glaciers retreat, oceans swell, ecosystems shift, species disappear, new opportunities emerge, entire landscapes vanish beneath advancing seas. Human populations move, adapt, innovate, and eventually begin changing the world in ways never seen before. Many of the conditions that make civilization possible will emerge directly from this transition. Stable climates, reliable seasons, expanding forests, fertile floodplains, new coastlines rich with resources. None of these developments occur overnight, and scholars still debate exactly how various environmental changes influence different human societies. no single explanation fully accounts for the enormous complexity involved. Yet the broad pattern remains unmistakable. The modern world does not simply appear after the Ice Age, it grows out of its ending. The cities, nations, trade routes, agricultural systems, and cultural traditions that define human history are rooted in changes that begin while mammoths still roam the earth and glaciers still dominate continents. To understand why the world looks the way it does today, it is necessary to journey back into that frozen age and watch as an ancient planet slowly transforms into something new. The story begins not with civilization, but with ice. The most astonishing feature of the Ice Age world is not the ice itself, it is the land. Modern maps create a powerful illusion. They suggest that continents, coastlines, and seas are permanent features of the planet, fixed in place like the borders of a painting. Yet coastlines are among the most temporary features on Earth. Given enough time, they advance and retreat, revealing landscapes and then hiding them again beneath the ocean. 20,000 years ago, much of the world would be almost unrecognizable to a modern traveller because so much land now lies underwater. Imagine standing on a shoreline and walking outward. Not a few hundred meters, not a few kilometers, hundreds of kilometers. In many parts of the world, that is exactly how much farther the coast extended during the last Ice Age. The reason is simple. With enormous quantities of water trapped inside continental ice sheets, the oceans shrank. Sea levels stood more than 100 meters lower than they do today. Continental shelves that now rest beneath shallow seas emerged into the open air. Vast plains, river valleys, marshlands, and rolling grasslands occupied places where waves break today. One of the most remarkable of these lost worlds existed between Britain and continental Europe. Today the North Sea separates them. Ships cross it. Storms sweep across it. Offshore wind farms rise from it. But during much of the Ice Age, there was no North Sea as we know it. Instead, a sprawling landscape connected Britain to the mainland. Scientists call this vanished region Doggerland. For thousands of years, Doggerland formed one of the richest environments in northwestern Europe. Rivers crossed its plains, wetlands attracted birds and fish, herds of animals moved across its grasslands, human groups almost certainly hunted, gathered, travelled, and perhaps established seasonal camps throughout the region. The evidence emerges slowly from beneath the sea. Fishing boats occasionally dredge up ancient bones, stone tools, and fragments of prehistoric life. Modern mapping technologies reveal drowned river channels, former hills, and entire landscapes preserved beneath layers of sediment. Piece by piece, researchers reconstruct a lost country that once supported human populations before disappearing beneath rising waters. Doggerland is not unique. Across Southeast Asia, another enormous landscape emerged from the lowered seas. Today islands such as Sumatra, Java, and Borneo are separated by water. During the Ice Age, many were joined together into a vast subcontinent known as Sundaland. Dense river systems crossed the region. Forests expanded and contracted with changing climates. Animals and humans moved across territories that modern geography has fragmented into islands. To someone living there at the time, there would have been little reason to imagine future oceans dividing these lands. The connections felt permanent. Farther north, a different bridge linked continents. Between Siberia and Alaska stretched Beringia, one of the most famous lost landscapes in human history. Rather than a narrow crossing, Beringia was an immense region, sometimes over 1,000 kilometers wide. It contained grasslands, rivers, lakes, and diverse wildlife. For generations, people likely lived within this environment rather than merely passing through it. The significance of Beringia cannot be overstated. It provided a pathway between Asia and North America, enabling human populations to enter lands that had never before seen our species. Scholars continue debating the precise timing and routes of these migrations, but the broader picture is clear. Without the lowered seas of the Ice Age, the peopling of the Americas would have unfolded very differently. Lost landscapes existed almost everywhere. The Persian Gulf was largely a river valley. The Black Sea occupied a different form. The coastline of China extended far beyond its modern position. Australia and New Guinea were joined into a larger landmass known as Sahel. Across the globe, coastlines rested in places that modern humans would struggle to recognize. What makes these drowned worlds especially important is where people prefer to live. Even today, human populations concentrate near coasts and rivers. These environments offer food, transportation, fresh water, and ecological diversity. The same was true during the Ice Age. Many prehistoric communities likely occupied shorelines that are now submerged beneath tens of meters of water. This creates one of archaeology's greatest challenges. The evidence has literally vanished beneath the sea. When archaeologists excavate inland sites, they are often examining places that survived rising waters, but countless camps, villages, and activity areas that once existed along ancient coastlines may now lie buried beneath marine sediments. Entire chapters of human history remain hidden offshore. The evidence remains incomplete because underwater archaeology is difficult, expensive, and relatively recent. Yet discoveries continue to accumulate. Submerged forests occasionally emerge from coastal sediments. Ancient tools appear in unexpected places. Drowned river valleys reveal clues about environments that disappeared thousands of years ago. The realization has transformed how researchers view the prehistoric world. For generations, many reconstructions of ancient human life focused heavily on inland regions because that is where evidence was easiest to find. Increasingly, scholars recognize that some of the most important prehistoric landscapes may now be underwater. This possibility changes our perspective on early humanity. Instead of imagining scattered groups occupying marginal environments, we begin to see populations living along rich coastlines, exploiting marine resources and inhabiting territories that no longer exist. The oceans have hidden much of their story. Yet the disappearance of these lands did not happen suddenly. In most places, the sea advanced gradually over centuries. A shoreline moved inland. Marshes became estuaries. River mouths widened. Low-lying plains flooded. Human communities adapted as conditions changed. A child might grow up near the coast and, by old age, find the sea noticeably closer. Generations later, familiar hunting grounds would be gone. Ancient pathways would vanish beneath the waves. Places filled with memory would disappear forever. This long drowning of the continental shelves represents one of the largest geographic transformations experienced by our species. Millions of square kilometers of land were lost. Entire ecosystems vanished. Migration routes changed. Habitats shifted. Yet for the people living through it, the process was likely experienced not as a global event but as countless local changes. A river altered course, a wetland expanded, a favorite campsite flooded, a familiar horizon transformed. Only from the perspective of deep time does the full scale become visible. The Ice Age world was larger than our own. More land stood above the water. More pathways connected distant regions. More landscapes existed between continents and seas. Then, slowly, relentlessly, those lands disappeared. The modern oceans conceal the remains of a forgotten planet beneath their surface, a planet where some of humanity's most important journeys unfolded, where animals migrated across now drowned plains, and where countless stories were lived and lost. As the climate continues warming and the glaciers continue retreating, that hidden world begins to vanish. But while the land itself is disappearing, the people who inhabit it are entering one of the most consequential chapters in human history. They are about to face a changing Earth unlike anything their ancestors have ever known. For the people living near the end of the Ice Age, survival is not a matter of convenience. It is a daily achievement. There are no reserves waiting beyond the horizon, no harvests stored in distant warehouses, no governments, roads, markets, or safety nets. Every meal depends on knowledge, skill, memory, cooperation, and sometimes luck. The world is vast, beautiful, and often unforgiving. Yet despite the hardships, humans are thriving in ways that would have seemed impossible to earlier members of their species. By roughly 20,000 years ago, Homo sapiens occupies an extraordinary range of environments. Human groups live in the cold margins of Eurasia, in deserts, forests, grasslands, tropical regions, and coastal landscapes. They have spread farther than any previous human species. Earlier relatives such as Neanderthals and Denisovans have largely disappeared, though traces of their DNA survive within many modern populations. Our species alone remains, carrying with it a remarkable capacity for adaptation. What makes this achievement especially impressive is the diversity of conditions people face. A hunting group in Ice Age France experiences a very different world from a fishing community along the Pacific coast of Asia or a family travelling across the grasslands of Beringia. Yet all belong to the same species. All are connected by shared cognitive abilities, symbolic thinking, language, and cultural learning. Knowledge has become humanity's greatest survival tool. A newborn enters the world with little understanding of its dangers. Over years, that child learns where water can be found during dry seasons, which animals are dangerous, how to recognize edible plants, how to make tools, how to navigate familiar territories, and how to cooperate with others. This accumulated knowledge passes from generation to generation. Unlike claws, fangs, or thick fur, knowledge can grow. And during the final stages of the Ice Age, it is growing rapidly. Archaeological evidence reveals increasingly sophisticated technologies. Stone blades become more refined. Bone needles allow tailored clothing. Harpoons appear in some regions. Fishing technologies improve. Hunters develop specialized tools suited to different environments and prey. In cold northern regions, clothing may mean the difference between life and death. Animal skins are carefully prepared. Garments are sewn rather than simply wrapped around the body. Small innovations accumulate: a better needle, a warmer cloak, a more efficient hunting weapon. Each improvement increases the chances of survival. The people who create these tools are often imagined as primitive. In reality, they possess intellectual abilities indistinguishable from our own. If an Ice Age child could somehow be transported into the modern world and raised in a contemporary society, there is little reason to think they would be unable to learn mathematics, science, literature, or engineering. The difference lies not in intelligence but in circumstance. Their world demands different skills, and it rewards a profound awareness of nature. A successful hunter might read tracks invisible to most modern observers. A skilled gatherer could identify seasonal resources across enormous territories. Elders preserve knowledge accumulated over decades, including memories of unusual weather patterns, animal behavior, and environmental change. This reservoir of experience becomes increasingly valuable because the world itself is beginning to change. As glaciers slowly retreat and temperatures fluctuate, ecosystems shift, forests advance into some regions, grasslands contract in others, animal populations move, rivers change course, familiar patterns become less predictable. For hunter-gatherer societies, environmental change creates both risks and opportunities. A warming climate may increase biological productivity in certain areas. New plants appear, new animals expand their range, previously frozen regions become habitable. Yet change also disrupts established ways of life. Hunting grounds that sustained generations may deteriorate. Seasonal migrations may alter. Resources once considered reliable become uncertain. Adaptation remains essential. One fascinating detail from this period involves the growing complexity of social networks. Evidence from archaeological sites suggests that some groups exchange materials across surprisingly large distances. Certain stone types travelled hundreds of kilometres from their sources. Shells appear far inland. Decorative objects move between communities. These exchanges serve practical purposes, but they may also strengthen social relationships. In unpredictable environments, maintaining connections with distant groups can provide access to information, resources, and potential marriage partners. Isolation is dangerous. Connection increases resilience. The archaeological record also reveals something equally important: creativity. Deep inside caves across Europe, ancient artists create images that continue to captivate viewers tens of thousands of years later. Horses, bison, mammoths, lions, and other animals appear with remarkable detail and movement. Handprints decorate walls, abstract symbols emerge. In some locations, people venture deep underground, carrying torches into chambers hidden from ordinary life. The exact meaning of much of this art remains uncertain. Scholars still debate whether these images relate to spiritual beliefs, storytelling, social identity, hunting traditions, or combinations of many factors. No single explanation fully accounts for the diversity of evidence. What is undeniable is the level of imagination involved. These are not merely people surviving from day to day. They are people creating meaning. They observe the stars. They bury their dead. They decorate objects. They tell stories. They teach children. They maintain traditions stretching across generations. Humanity is becoming increasingly cultural. This development may prove just as important as any environmental change occurring around them. Culture allows knowledge to accumulate faster than biological evolution. Useful innovations spread through learning rather than genetics. Communities adapt not only through physical survival, but through shared experience. When climates shift, culture becomes a survival mechanism. When landscapes transform, culture preserves memory. When uncertainty grows, culture provides continuity. As the Ice Age approaches its conclusion, these qualities will be tested repeatedly. The warming world is opening new possibilities. Regions once dominated by ice are beginning to emerge. Plants and animals are moving into newly available territories. Human groups follow. Some populations expand into northern lands that previous generations could not occupy. Others adjust to changing coastlines. New routes appear while older ones disappear. The map of human habitation becomes increasingly dynamic. Yet beneath these opportunities lies a growing challenge. The natural world that sustained Ice Age life for thousands of years is entering a period of instability. The great mammoth herds that once roamed immense grasslands will not endure forever. Certain ecosystems are beginning to fragment. Climate fluctuations remain capable of dramatic reversals. Some of the largest animals on Earth are approaching a crisis from which they will never recover. For now, however, most people cannot see the larger pattern. Their attention remains focused on immediate concerns: food, family, weather, and survival. A hunter watches the movement of distant animals. A child learns familiar trails. An elder recalls how the landscape looked decades earlier. None can fully grasp that they stand near one of the most important turning points in human history. The Ice Age world is still alive around them. The mammoths still walk. The glaciers still dominate the north. The hidden continents beyond modern coastlines still exist. But the balance that created this world is weakening, and the first unmistakable signs of transformation are beginning to appear in the air, the water, and the land itself. At first, almost nobody would have noticed. The ending of the Ice Age does not begin with a dramatic crack in the sky or a sudden collapse of the glaciers. There is no single day when people awaken and realize the world has entered a new age. Instead, the transformation starts with changes so subtle that they are nearly invisible within a human lifetime. A valley experiences slightly longer growing seasons. Snow melts earlier in spring. A glacier that once seemed permanent retreats a little farther into the mountains. Certain plants begin appearing beyond their previous range. A river carries more meltwater during the warmer months. Taken individually, these changes appear local and insignificant. Seen across continents and centuries, they become the opening movements of a planetary transition. The ultimate causes lie far beyond the reach of the people experiencing them. High above Earth, slow variations in the planet's orbit alter the distribution of solar energy reaching the surface. These orbital cycles, operating over tens of thousands of years, have influenced climate repeatedly throughout the Ice Age. The amount of sunlight received by Earth changes only slightly, yet climate systems are sensitive. Small shifts can trigger larger responses through feedback loops involving ice, oceans, vegetation, and atmospheric gases. Ice reflects sunlight efficiently. When ice expands, more sunlight is reflected back into space, reinforcing cooling. When ice retreats, darker land and water absorb more heat, reinforcing warming. The process resembles a giant planetary balance. Once movement begins in one direction, additional forces can amplify it. Scientists continue refining their understanding of these interactions, and many details remain subjects of active research. The evidence remains incomplete in some regions, particularly where ancient environmental records are fragmentary. Yet the overall pattern is remarkably clear. The world is warming, slowly at first, then more noticeably. One of the most important clues comes from ice itself. Deep within Greenland and Antarctica, ancient snow accumulated layer upon layer over hundreds of thousands of years. Compressed into ice, these layers preserve tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere. They act as natural archives, recording temperatures, greenhouse gas concentrations, volcanic activity, and other environmental signals. When researchers drill deep into these ice sheets, they recover a history written not in words but in frozen chemistry. That history reveals a planet gradually emerging from glacial conditions. Temperatures rise. Carbon dioxide increases. Ice sheets begin responding. The changes do not occur uniformly. Some regions warm faster than others. Some experience periods of relative stability. Climate remains highly variable. Yet the broader direction becomes increasingly difficult to miss. Across Europe, forests slowly advance into territories previously dominated by open tundra and grassland. In North America, glaciers begin retreating from their southern limits. Across northern Eurasia, ecosystems reorganize. Entire biological communities shift their positions across the landscape. Animals follow suitable habitats. Plants expand into new territories. Humans adapt alongside them. One of the surprising aspects of this transition is how dynamic nature becomes. Modern people often think of ecosystems as stable arrangements. In reality, species are constantly responding to environmental pressures. As temperatures rise, trees migrate. Not because individual trees move, of course, but because seeds spread farther north generation after generation. Forest boundaries advance over centuries. Grasslands shrink in some places and expand in others. Wetlands appear where conditions allow. The landscape becomes a living map of climate change. What survives in the record suggests that these environmental shifts can happen faster than many earlier generations of scientists once assumed. Pollen preserved in lake sediments reveals surprisingly rapid ecological transformations in certain regions. Layers of ancient mud capture changing plant communities with remarkable precision. A lake that once bordered tundra may eventually find itself surrounded by forest. A grassland may become woodland. A cold steppe may support entirely new species. To the people living through these changes, the world is becoming less predictable. The hunting grounds inherited from ancestors no longer behave exactly as before. Animal migrations alter. Seasonal patterns shift. Certain resources become more abundant while others decline. Adaptability becomes increasingly important. Yet warming is not universally beneficial. This is one of the most important realities of environmental change. Every gain comes with potential losses. Regions previously trapped beneath ice become available for colonization. Biological productivity increases in many areas. New opportunities emerge. At the same time, ecosystems that evolved under colder conditions begin experiencing stress. Species adapted to Ice Age environments find their habitats shrinking. The mammoth steppe, one of the most extensive ecosystems of the glacial world, starts fragmenting. Cold-adapted animals lose territory. Competition changes. Ecological balances begin shifting. No single moment marks the beginning of this process. Instead, countless small adjustments accumulate across generations. A child notices a plant rarely seen by grandparents. A hunter encounters animals farther north than expected. A community discovers that familiar seasonal patterns no longer arrive on schedule. Memory and observation become crucial tools for understanding the changing world. For societies dependent on direct interaction with nature, environmental awareness is not an academic exercise. It is a necessity. Every variation matters. Every clue carries significance. Every season teaches lessons. And there are signs everywhere. Mountain glaciers retreat from valleys they occupied for thousands of years. Meltwater streams grow larger. Lakes expand. New wetlands appear. Rivers transport increasing quantities of sediment. In some regions, enormous volumes of fresh water pour from melting ice sheets into downstream systems. The scale of these processes is difficult to imagine. The ice-covering parts of North America and Europe contains enough frozen water to reshape the geography of entire continents. As melting accelerates, landscapes begin responding in dramatic ways. The first hints of those future transformations are already visible. A growing river, an expanding lake, an exposed hillside where ice once stood, a newly habitable valley. These changes may seem disconnected, but they are all expressions of the same underlying phenomenon. The Ice Age is weakening. The frozen world that shaped human existence for thousands of generations is beginning to lose its grip. Yet the process remains far from smooth. If the climate simply warmed steadily, the story would be easier to understand. Instead, the Earth system behaves in complex and sometimes surprising ways. Warming periods are interrupted by reversals. Regional climates respond differently. Oceans influence atmospheric circulation. massive ice sheets continue affecting weather patterns. Scholars still debate the precise mechanisms behind some of these fluctuations. No single explanation fully accounts for every regional outcome. The climate system is vast, interconnected, and capable of abrupt changes. That complexity will soon reveal itself in dramatic fashion. For now, however, the dominant trend continues. Year after year, century after century, millennium after millennium, the glaciers retreat, the forests advance, the seas prepare to rise, and humanity, still living largely as hunters and gatherers, finds itself entering a world increasingly different from the one its ancestors knew. The transformation remains gradual enough to escape immediate notice. But deep time is patient. The changes accumulating across the landscape are laying the groundwork for events that will permanently alter the shape of the Earth and the future of our species. For thousands of years, the glaciers seem eternal. They dominate horizons, shape weather patterns, redirect rivers, and define the boundaries of entire worlds. Generations are born and die in their shadow. Stories are told beneath skies influenced by their presence. To the people living near them, the great ice sheets must appear as permanent feature of existence itself. Yet permanence is often an illusion. As the climate continues warming, the immense frozen masses covering much of the northern hemisphere begin a retreat that will fundamentally remake the planet. The scale of these glaciers is almost impossible to comprehend through modern experience. The Laurentide ice sheet covers much of North America. The Fennoscandian ice sheet stretches across northern Europe. Together with other glacial systems, they contain staggering quantities of frozen water accumulated over thousands of years. In some places, the ice reaches thicknesses measured not in meters but in kilometers. Imagine standing beneath a frozen ceiling taller than many mountain ranges. Imagine a weight so immense that it physically bends the Earth's crust downward. That is the reality of the late Ice Age world. When melting accelerates, the consequences extend far beyond the loss of ice itself. Entire continents begin responding to the removal of this colossal burden. One of the most fascinating details of the deglaciation process involves the ground beneath the ice. For thousands of years, the tremendous weight of glaciers presses the land downward. The crust slowly sinks into the softer mantle below. Then the ice retreats. The pressure eases, and the land begins rising again. This process, known today as isostatic rebound, continues in some regions even now. Parts of Scandinavia and Canada are still slowly lifting upward thousands of years after the glaciers disappeared. Modern coastlines are still adjusting to events that began near the end of the Ice Age. The Earth remembers, not through memory in any human sense, but through geological responses that unfold across immense spans of time. As glaciers withdraw, they leave unmistakable marks on the landscape. Valleys carved by ice become lakes and fjords. Rocky surfaces bear scratches created by moving ice. Hills of sediment mark former glacial margins. Vast deposits of sand, gravel, and clay accumulate where meltwater once flowed. Many of the most famous landscapes on Earth owe their existence to these processes. The fjords of Norway, the Great Lakes of North America, countless lakes scattered across northern Europe and Canada, all are products, directly or indirectly, of glacial activity. The retreat itself is not smooth. Glaciers advance and retreat in pulses. Climatic fluctuations alter melting rates. Some regions experience relatively gradual changes, while others witness dramatic transformations. What survives in the geological record suggests a dynamic and often unpredictable process. In certain places, enormous blocks of ice become isolated from the main glacier. As they melt, they leave depressions that fill with water, forming kettle lakes. Elsewhere, Meltwater carves channels through sediments and bedrock, creating entirely new drainage systems. The landscape becomes a work in progress. Every year, more land emerges from beneath the ice. Fresh terrain appears where no human has ever walked. Plants begin colonizing exposed ground. Hardy species arrive first. Mosses, grasses, and small shrubs establish footholds. Gradually, more complex ecosystems follow. The sequence resembles a slow-motion ecological invasion. Life advances behind the retreating ice. Animals follow. Then humans. For hunter-gatherer groups, newly available territories represent opportunity. Regions previously inaccessible become open for exploration. Herds move into fresh grazing lands. Rivers create new travel corridors. Resources expand into areas once buried beneath kilometers of ice. The north is opening, yet the retreat of glaciers also generates instability. As vast quantities of meltwater flow from the ice sheets, rivers swell dramatically, sediment loads increase, lakes grow larger, flood risks multiply. In some cases, water accumulates behind natural ice dams. These temporary barriers can hold astonishing volumes of water, but they are not permanent. When they fail, the results can be catastrophic. Evidence from North America reveals episodes in which enormous glacial lakes suddenly drained. The released water surged across landscapes on a scale that challenges imagination. Entire valleys were reshaped. Massive erosion occurred. Geological scars remain visible today. One of the most spectacular examples involves the region now known as the Channeled Scablands in the northwestern United States. Here, gigantic floods carved dramatic features into the terrain. The hypothesis initially proposed to explain them seemed so extreme that many scientists rejected it. The idea suggested floods of extraordinary magnitude, water moving in volumes far beyond ordinary river systems. Landscapes transformed with astonishing speed. Over time, evidence accumulated. The controversial explanation proved largely correct. The geological record preserves traces of floods that dwarf anything witnessed during recorded human history. These events remind us that the ending of the Ice Age is not merely a gentle warming trend. It is a period of profound environmental upheaval. Gigantic forces are being unleashed. Water stored for millennia is returning to circulation. Rivers, lakes, coastlines, and ecosystems are adjusting simultaneously. And the changes are interconnected. A retreating glacier may alter a river. A river may affect a floodplain. A floodplain may influence animal migrations. Animal movements may affect human settlement patterns. Everything is linked. This interconnectedness becomes increasingly apparent as researchers reconstruct the final stages of deglaciation. The more evidence emerges, the clearer it becomes that humans are living through one of the most significant environmental transitions in the entire history of our species. Yet despite the enormous scale of these processes, daily life continues. Families still gather food. Hunters still track animals. Children still learn survival skills from parents and elders. The vast climatic transformation remains largely invisible when viewed from the perspective of a single season or year. Even major environmental shifts often unfold through cumulative experiences rather than sudden revelations. A familiar glacier retreats beyond a ridge. A valley becomes accessible. A river changes character. A new lake appears. Gradually, people adjust. What once seemed extraordinary becomes normal. This ability to adapt is one of humanity's defining strengths. But adaptation has limits. The retreat of the glaciers is creating opportunities, yet it is also destabilizing ecosystems that have existed for thousands of years. Species dependent upon cold environments face growing challenges. Long-established ecological relationships begin unraveling. The mammoth steppe that once stretched across enormous portions of the northern hemisphere is shrinking. Forests advance into former grasslands. Habitats fragment. Environmental pressures intensify. The consequences will not be immediate everywhere, but they are coming. Some of the most iconic animals of the Ice Age are approaching a crossroads from which they may never recover. At the same time, the water released from melting glaciers is slowly gathering in another place. The oceans. For now, much of the change remains concentrated inland among rivers, lakes, and ice margins, but every drop of meltwater contributes to a transformation occurring on a planetary scale. The seas are rising, and with each passing century, they move a little farther across the vast coastal plains that have existed throughout the Ice Age. The hidden continents revealed by lowered sea levels are living on borrowed time. Long before the oceans reach their modern shorelines, the first signs of change appear inland. Water begins to dominate the story. Not frozen water locked inside glaciers, but moving water flowing, spreading, pooling, carving, flooding, and reshaping the land with relentless persistence. As the great ice sheets retreat farther north, they release staggering quantities of meltwater into rivers and basins across the northern hemisphere. The result is a world increasingly defined by lakes, wetlands, floodplains, and waterways unlike anything most people had previously known. Entire landscapes are transformed. Some of the most dramatic changes occur where retreating glaciers leave behind immense depressions in the land. Water fills these newly available basins, creating lakes of extraordinary size. Many exist only temporarily in geological terms, yet some persist for thousands of years and become dominant features of regional environments. One of the greatest of these was Lake Agassiz. Named by modern scientists long after its disappearance, this colossal body of water once occupied portions of present-day Canada and the northern United States. At times it covered an area larger than many modern countries. Standing on its shores would have felt less like looking at a lake and more like staring across an inland sea. The scale is difficult to grasp. Modern lakes often appear immense to human observers, but Lake Agassiz dwarfed many of them. Winds generated waves. Vast stretches of open water disappeared beyond the horizon. Shorelines shifted as water levels rose and fell. Rivers fed into it. Rivers flowed out of it. Sometimes those outlets changed entirely as glaciers retreated and new drainage routes emerged. The lake was never truly stable. In fact, instability becomes one of the defining characteristics of the post-Ice Age world. As glaciers melt, water constantly seeks new pathways. Rivers expand beyond their former channels. Temporary lakes form behind ice dams. Existing lakes merge, divide, overflow, or drain. What seems permanent in one generation may be altered dramatically in the next. This environmental dynamism creates both opportunities and dangers. Wetlands flourish in many regions. Fish populations increase. Waterfowl gather in enormous numbers. Plant diversity expands. For human communities, these environments can become extraordinarily productive. Food sources multiply. Travel routes improve. Seasonal camps appear in locations that offer access to multiple resources. A river valley can suddenly become one of the richest landscapes available. Yet abundance often arrives alongside unpredictability. A river swollen by glacial meltwater does not always remain within its banks. Floodplains expand. Channels migrate. Entire sections of landscape can be transformed by seasonal flooding. Communities that learn to exploit these environments must also learn to live with their risks. Evidence from ancient sediments reveals rivers behaving very differently from many of their modern counterparts. Some carry vastly greater water volumes than they do today. Others occupy channels that no longer exist. In numerous locations, former river systems are preserved as ghostly traces across the landscape, visible only through geological investigation. The map of the world is changing, not merely along coastlines, but throughout the interiors of continents. One particularly fascinating aspect of this transformation involves drainage systems. Modern people often assume rivers naturally occupy their current courses. In reality, many river networks are products of Ice Age and post-Ice Age events. When glaciers block valleys, water is forced elsewhere. When ice retreats, entirely new routes become available. When lakes overflow, rivers may suddenly connect regions previously isolated from one another. Some waterways are effectively rerouted by climate itself. What survives in the geological record suggests repeated episodes of reorganization on remarkable scales. Rivers that once flowed north may begin flowing south. Watersheds shift. New channels capture older systems. Landscapes are continuously rewritten. The consequences ripple outward through ecosystems. Fish populations spread into newly connected waterways. Wetland species colonize fresh habitats. Large herbivores adjust migration routes. Predators follow prey. Humans adapt alongside all of them. For hunter-gatherer groups, rivers become more than sources of water. They serve as transportation corridors, ecological highways, and centers of opportunity. Following a river often means finding fish, game, edible plants, and relatively easy travel through otherwise difficult terrain. Many of the places that later become centers of civilization first gain importance during this era of environmental transformation. The connection is not accidental. Water concentrates life, and life attracts people. Across Europe, Asia, and North America, expanding river systems and growing wetlands create increasingly complex ecological mosaics. Areas once dominated by cold, open landscapes begin supporting greater biological diversity. Forests spread into suitable regions. Marshes form along low-lying terrain. Lakes create new habitats. The earth is becoming greener. Not everywhere and not all at once, but the trend is unmistakable. In many places, warming temperatures and increasing moisture support expanding vegetation. Regions formerly constrained by harsh glacial conditions become capable of sustaining richer ecosystems. To human observers, these changes may seem beneficial. Often they are. Yet every ecological gain involves trade-offs. Open grasslands that support certain large animals may gradually disappear beneath advancing forests. Species adapted to wide, treeless environments lose territory. Hunting strategies perfected over generations become less effective in changing landscapes. A hunter who once tracked herds across open plains may now find forests obstructing visibility. Animals become harder to locate. Movement patterns shift. Knowledge accumulated over centuries must be updated. This constant adaptation becomes one of the defining experiences of late Ice Age populations. The environment is no longer behaving as it did in the past. Memory remains valuable, but memory alone is no longer sufficient. Innovation becomes increasingly important. Communities that successfully adjust gain advantages. Those that fail may struggle. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars continue debating the precise relationships between environmental change and human behavior during this period. Human societies are complex. Climate influences them, but does not determine every outcome. Cultural choices, social networks, technologies, and local conditions all play important roles. Still, the broader pattern is difficult to ignore. As rivers, lakes, and ecosystems change, human populations respond. People move. People adapt. People experiment. New possibilities emerge. And all the while, water continues its work. Every glacier that melts contributes more fresh water. Every river carries sediment toward the sea. Every expanding lake alters local geography. The world remains in motion. Some of the largest lakes formed during this period eventually disappear. Others shrink dramatically. Some leave behind fertile soils that later attract agricultural communities. Their former shorelines remain visible long after the water itself has vanished. These forgotten lakes become silent witnesses to a changing planet. A traveller crossing certain modern landscapes may unknowingly walk along ancient beaches hundreds of kilometres from any present shoreline. Hidden beneath fields and forests lie traces of waters that once dominated entire regions. The earth preserves these memories patiently, and they reveal something profound. The ending of the Ice Age is not simply a story about melting ice. It is a story about transformation. Water liberated from glaciers begins reorganizing the geography of continents. Rivers, lakes, wetlands, and ecosystems respond. Human societies adapt to changing opportunities and emerging challenges. Yet the greatest transformation remains ahead. The lakes may expand. The rivers may shift. The wetlands may flourish. But all of this fresh water is ultimately flowing toward a destination that will reshape the human world more dramatically than any inland change. The oceans are waiting, and they are beginning to rise fast enough that entire landscapes will soon start disappearing beneath the waves. For thousands of years, the coast seems distant. A community establishes camps beside a river. Children grow up learning familiar landmarks. Hunters follow trails across broad plains. Generations pass. The sea exists somewhere beyond the horizon, but it feels fixed and predictable. Then, slowly, the shoreline begins to move. At first the change is barely noticeable. Salt water reaches slightly farther inland. Marshes expand into low-lying areas. Tidal channels appear where none existed before. Small islands become separated from the mainland during high water. The transformation unfolds so gradually that no single generation witnesses its full extent. Yet century after century the ocean advances. What follows becomes one of the largest geographical reorganizations experienced by Homo sapiens. As glaciers continue melting, global sea levels rise. The process is neither perfectly smooth nor uniform. Different regions experience different rates of change depending on local geography, tectonic activity, and the lingering effects of glacial rebound. Nevertheless, the overall trend is unmistakable. The sea is reclaiming land that existed throughout the Ice Age. The scale of this flooding is extraordinary. More than 100 meters of sea level rise separate the world near the glacial maximum from the world we know today. Coastlines migrate inland across vast distances. Continental shelves disappear beneath advancing waters. River valleys become estuaries. Plains become seabeds. Entire landscapes vanish. Modern people often imagine environmental change in terms of decades. The end of the Ice Age operates on longer timescales, yet the cumulative impact is far greater. Millions of square kilometers of habitable land are gradually lost beneath the oceans. What makes this especially important is where humans prefer to live. Throughout history, people have gravitated toward coastlines. Coastal regions provide food, transportation, fresh water, and ecological diversity. They offer access to fish, shellfish, birds, mammals, and fertile river mouths. The same attraction existed thousands of years ago. Many prehistoric communities likely occupied coastal environments that are now underwater. This realization has transformed archaeological thinking. For generations, researchers reconstructed prehistory largely from inland sites, because those were the places available for excavation. But as evidence accumulates, it becomes increasingly clear that some of the most important human landscapes of the late Ice Age may lie hidden beneath modern seas. The oceans have concealed vast portions of humanity's past. Along the continental shelves of Europe, Asia, Australia, and the Americas, ancient coastlines now rest beneath layers of sediment and seawater, campsites, hunting grounds, migration routes, and perhaps even larger settlements may have disappeared during the long flooding that followed the Ice Age. The evidence remains incomplete because underwater archaeology faces immense challenges. Locating submerged sites across enormous areas is difficult. Preservation varies widely. Many regions remain largely unexplored. Yet discoveries continue to emerge. Ancient forests occasionally appear beneath coastal waters. Submerged peat beds reveal former landscapes. Stone tools are recovered from drowned environments. Former river channels become visible through sonar mapping. Piece by piece, the outlines of the lost worlds begin reappearing. Among the most famous examples is Doggerland, the great plain that once connected Britain to continental Europe. For thousands of years, this region supported plants, animals, and human communities. Rivers crossed fertile terrain. Wetlands attracted wildlife. People likely moved through the landscape regularly. Then the sea advanced. The flooding did not happen overnight. It unfolded over centuries. Coastlines migrated. Low-lying regions disappeared. Habitats shifted. Human groups adapted repeatedly as familiar territory shrank. Eventually, what had once been dry land became the North Sea. Today, fishing vessels occasionally bring fragments of that vanished world back to the surface. Mammoth bones emerge from the seabed. Ancient tools appear in fishing nets. Geological surveys reveal drowned valleys and former hills hidden beneath the waves. The landscape is gone, but traces remain. Farther south, another remarkable transformation unfolds. The Persian Gulf, now a major body of water, was once a vast lowland basin crossed by rivers. During periods of lower sea level, it may have provided attractive habitats for human populations. Some researchers have suggested that communities occupied portions of this landscape before rising waters gradually inundated it. The details remain debated, and evidence is necessarily limited because much of the relevant terrain now lies underwater. Still, the possibility highlights how dramatically the geography of human habitation changed during the post-Ice Age flooding. Across Southeast Asia, Sunderland experiences a similar fate. During the Ice Age, extensive plains connect regions that are now separate islands. As sea levels rise, these connections disappear, coastlines fragment, populations become increasingly isolated from one another. Geography itself is being rewritten. The effects extend beyond human societies. Animals lose habitats. Migration routes disappear. Freshwater ecosystems become marine environments. Entire ecological communities are displaced or destroyed. Some species adapt. Others struggle. Many environments simply cease to exist. For the people experiencing these changes, the flooding likely feels local rather than global. A particular marsh expands. A favourite hunting area disappears. A river mouth shifts position. Saltwater reaches farther inland. The concept of global sea level rise belongs to modern science. The lived experience consists of countless individual losses and adjustments. A place remembered by grandparents lies beneath the tide. An old pathway vanishes. A seasonal camp can no longer be reached. Each generation inherits a slightly different landscape. Yet humans prove remarkably adaptable. Communities relocate. New resources are exploited. Alternative routes are discovered. Social networks help populations adjust to changing conditions. Adaptation remains possible because the flooding usually occurs gradually enough to allow movement. But gradual does not mean insignificant. Over centuries, the cumulative effect is enormous. Some researchers have wondered whether memories of rising waters survived in oral traditions long after the events themselves. The idea remains difficult to prove. Stories evolve, myths change. Direct connections between specific Ice Age floods and later traditions are often impossible to establish with confidence. Nevertheless, the persistence of flood narratives across many cultures has attracted attention. Scholars remain cautious. No single explanation fully accounts for the diversity of flood stories around the world. Yet it is intriguing to consider that communities witnessing dramatic environmental transformations may have preserved fragments of those experiences through storytelling, memory, and cultural tradition. What is certain is that rising seas fundamentally altered the human map. The world became smaller. Land bridges disappeared. Former migration routes vanished. Coastal populations relocated. Continents assumed shapes increasingly familiar to modern eyes. The transformation is so complete that it is easy to forget how recent it was. Many of today's coastlines are geological newcomers. Many of today's seas occupy landscapes where people once walked. Many of the places that helped shape human history now rest beneath water. The oceans conceal not only lost land but lost experiences, lost journeys, and lost generations. And while the seas continue advancing inland, another crisis is unfolding across the changing ecosystems of the post-Ice Age world. The giant animals that once defined entire continents are beginning to disappear. The mammoths still roam. The giant sloths still survive in some regions. The great beasts of the Ice Age have not yet vanished. But their time is running out. For countless generations, the giants seem as permanent as the mountains. Across the cold grasslands of Eurasia and North America, mammoths move in family groups through open landscapes. Giant ground sloths browse vegetation in the Americas. Mastodons wander through forests. Giant deer carry antlers so immense they appear almost unreal. Saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, cave bears, and other remarkable creatures occupy ecological roles unlike anything seen in the modern world. To the humans who share these environments, such animals are not legends. They are reality. They provide food, materials, danger, opportunity, and meaning. Their images appear in cave art. Their bones are used for tools and shelters. Their movements influence human travel and hunting strategies. Entire ways of life develop around ecosystems that include these enormous creatures. Then, within a relatively short span of geological time, many of them disappear. The extinction of the Ice Age megafauna remains one of the most fascinating and debated mysteries in prehistoric history. The basic facts are clear. By the end of the Ice Age and the beginning of the Holocene, numerous large animal species have vanished from many parts of the world. Mammoths disappear from most of their range. Giant sloths vanish. Mastodons disappear. Numerous large predators and herbivores are lost forever. The scale of the extinction is extraordinary. North America alone loses dozens of large mammal species. South America experiences similar losses. Australia had already witnessed a major wave of megafaunal extinctions earlier. Though debates continue regarding timing and causes, other regions experience varying patterns of decline. What makes the mystery so compelling is that no single explanation fully accounts for every case. Scientists have proposed several major contributing factors. Climate change is one of them. Human hunting is another. Many researchers suspect that a combination of pressures ultimately proved decisive. The challenge lies in untangling their relative importance. As the Ice Age ends, environments are changing rapidly. The mammoth steppe, once one of the largest ecosystems on Earth, begins fragmenting. Open grasslands give way to expanding forests in some regions. Temperatures rise, moisture patterns shift. Habitats that supported cold-adapted species shrink. For animals specialized for those conditions, adaptation becomes increasingly difficult. The woolly mammoth provides a powerful example. These animals evolve for life in cold, open environments. Thick fur, layers of fat, and specialized adaptations help them survive harsh climates. As forests spread and grasslands contract, suitable habitat becomes increasingly fragmented. Population numbers likely decline. Groups become isolated. Genetic diversity may decrease. Environmental pressures intensify. Climate alone appears capable of placing significant stress on such species. Yet climate change is only part of the story. Human beings are also expanding across many regions during this period. Unlike earlier hominins, Homo sapiens possesses highly effective hunting technologies, complex social cooperation, and the ability to adapt rapidly to new environments. As people spread into previously unoccupied territories, they encounter animal populations that may have little experience with human predators. This coincidence has attracted enormous scientific attention. In some regions, megafaunal extinctions occur not long after human arrival. The pattern is striking enough that many researchers view human hunting as an important contributing factor. The idea is sometimes called the overkill hypothesis, though the term can oversimplify a complex reality. Few scientists today imagine prehistoric hunters single-handedly exterminating entire species through relentless slaughter. Instead, the possibility is that even relatively modest hunting pressure could have significant effects on already vulnerable populations. Large animals reproduce slowly. They require substantial resources. Their populations often recover gradually from losses. When climate stress and hunting pressure occur simultaneously, the combined impact may become difficult to withstand. The evidence varies from species to species and region to region. Some sites contain clear indications of human interaction with megafauna. Mammoth bones bear cut marks. Hunting activities are documented. Associations between people and large prey are well established. Other cases remain less certain. The evidence is incomplete. Scholars continue debating specific timelines, regional variations, and causal relationships. The reality may differ substantially across continents. What happened in North America may not precisely match what occurred in Eurasia. Different species face different pressures. Different ecosystems respond differently. One particularly intriguing detail is that a few mammoth populations survive far longer than many people realize. While mammoths disappear from most of their range thousands of years earlier, isolated groups persist on remote Arctic islands. On Wrangel Island, north of Siberia, mammoths survive until roughly 4,000 years ago. That means mammoths are still alive while ancient civilizations are already flourishing elsewhere. While people construct monuments in Egypt and cities emerge in parts of Mesopotamia, the last surviving mammoths continue roaming a remote island in the Arctic Ocean. The overlap feels almost impossible. Yet it is real. Their survival illustrates an important principle. Extinction is rarely a single moment. It is often a prolonged process involving shrinking populations, fragmented habitats, and isolated survivors. The final disappearance may come long after the broader decline has begun. For humans, these extinctions carry consequences beyond the loss of individual species. Entire ecosystems change. Large herbivores influence vegetation patterns. Predators regulate prey populations. Animal migration shape landscapes. remove enough major species, and ecological relationships begin reorganizing. The post-Ice Age world increasingly differs from the world that produced human civilization. Future generations will inherit forests where mammoth herds once grazed. They will encounter ecosystems already transformed by extinction. Many of the animals depicted in cave paintings will exist only in memory. Yet those memories endure. Ancient artists unknowingly preserve visual records of creatures destined to disappear. Their paintings survive long after the animals themselves are gone. Across Europe and elsewhere, cave walls become archives of lost worlds. A mammoth drawn by human hands 30,000 years ago may outlast the final living mammoth by tens of thousands of years. The image remains. The animal vanishes. There is something profoundly moving in that contrast. Human memory, expressed through culture, sometimes survives environmental change more successfully than the species surrounding it. As the great Ice Age animals decline, humanity itself continues expanding and adapting. The climate remains unstable, the glaciers continue retreating, the seas continue rising. And then, just as warming appears to be firmly established, something unexpected happens. The world abruptly lurches back toward cold conditions. After centuries of warming, temperatures plunge once more. Glaciers stabilize or advance in some regions. Ecosystems face renewed disruption. The ending of the Ice Age, it turns out, is not a smooth journey toward a warmer future. One of its greatest surprises is still ahead. By roughly 13,000 years ago, the world appears to be moving in a clear direction. The great ice sheets are retreating, temperatures are rising, forests are expanding into regions once dominated by tundra and steppe. Rivers carry increasing volumes of meltwater. The transformation that began centuries earlier seems firmly underway. Then, unexpectedly, the trend reverses. Not everywhere in exactly the same way, and not with equal intensity across the globe, but the evidence preserved in ice cores, lake sediments, cave deposits, and ancient pollen records reveal something remarkable. The climate suddenly cools. For people living through it, the change would have been confusing and unsettling. Generations had grown accustomed to gradual warming. Landscapes were adjusting. Plants and animals were responding. Human populations were adapting to new opportunities. Then colder conditions return. The event is known today as the Younger Dryas, named after a cold-adapted wildflower called Dryas octopetala, whose remains became associated with the climatic shift in parts of Europe. It lasts for roughly 1,200 years. In geological terms, that is a brief interruption. In human terms, it is an entire era. Dozens of generations live and die within its span. For them, this is not a temporary anomaly. It is simply the world they know. The Younger Dryas represents one of the most fascinating climate mysteries of the late Ice Age. Scientists broadly agree that the event occurred. The evidence is overwhelming. Temperatures in parts of the northern hemisphere fell significantly. Glacial conditions strengthened in some regions. Ecological changes unfolded rapidly. What remains debated is the precise mechanism responsible. No single explanation has achieved universal acceptance. One of the leading ideas involves the enormous quantities of fresh water released from melting ice sheets. To understand the hypothesis, it helps to think of the oceans not as static bodies of water, but as parts of a vast global circulation system. Warm water moves through certain regions. Cold water sinks in others. Together, these movements help redistribute heat around the planet. Changes in this circulation can alter climate dramatically. As glaciers melt, huge volumes of fresh water enter the North Atlantic. Because fresh water is less dense than salt water, large inputs may disrupt normal ocean circulation patterns. Some researchers proposed that this interference weakened the transport of heat toward northern regions, contributing to rapid cooling. The concept is plausible. Many climate models support aspects of it. Yet important questions remain. The timing, magnitude, and precise sequence of events continue to be investigated. The evidence remains incomplete. Scientists are still refining their understanding of how different components of the climate system interacted during this period. Other hypotheses have been proposed over the years. Some researchers suggested that a comet or asteroid impact might have triggered the Younger Dryas. The idea attracted considerable public attention because of its dramatic implications. However, most specialists remain unconvinced. The impact hypothesis continues to be disputed, and the majority of available evidence favors explanations involving climate and oceanic processes rather than a catastrophic extraterrestrial event. The debate serves as a reminder that science often advances through competing interpretations tested against evidence. Not every popular theory survives scrutiny. What matters is where the strongest evidence ultimately leads. Regardless of the exact mechanism, the effects of the Younger Dryas are real. In parts of Europe, colder conditions return. Vegetation patterns shift. Glacial activity strengthens locally. Ecosystems that had begun adapting to warming must adjust again. The environmental instability is profound. Imagine living in a world where climate appears to be moving steadily in one direction, only to reverse unexpectedly within the span of a few generations. Knowledge inherited from elders becomes less reliable. Seasonal expectations change. Animal movements alter. Resources fluctuate. Adaptation once again becomes essential. For human societies, flexibility proves invaluable. Communities capable of adjusting to changing conditions survive. Those dependent upon narrow environmental circumstances face greater risks. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Younger Dryas concerns its relationship to cultural development. In parts of the Near East, human groups are already experimenting with increasingly intensive use of wild grains and other resources. Some settlements become more substantial than earlier hunter-gatherer camps. Social organization grows more complex. Scholars continue debating exactly how climatic instability influenced these developments. Did environmental pressures encourage innovation? Did changing conditions make certain strategies more attractive? Or were broader social and cultural factors more important? The answers remain uncertain. Human history is rarely driven by a single cause. Still, the coincidence is striking. At precisely the moment when some populations appear to be moving toward new forms of organization, the climate introduces fresh challenges. The Younger Dryas reminds us that progress is not inevitable. The path toward agriculture, settlement, and civilization is not a smooth ascent. It unfolds within an unpredictable natural world. Nature remains capable of surprising even highly adaptable human societies. The event also highlights a broader truth about the end of the Ice Age. Climate change is not always gradual. Sometimes the Earth system shifts with startling speed. Ice core records from Greenland reveal temperature changes occurring over remarkably short periods. While the exact local experiences vary, some transitions appear far more abrupt than scientists once believed possible. The climate system contains thresholds. Cross them, and significant change may follow. This realization carries importance far beyond prehistoric history. It demonstrates that planetary systems can respond rapidly under certain conditions. The ending of the Ice Age is therefore not simply a story of slow warming. It is a story of complexity. Advances followed by setbacks. Warming interrupted by cooling. Stability repeatedly challenged by disruption. Yet despite the Younger Dryas, the broader trajectory of Earth's climate continues moving away from full glacial conditions. The interruption eventually ends. Temperatures rise again. The glaciers resume their retreat. The Holocene, the relatively warm climatic period in which all recorded human civilization will develop, begins. The world emerging from this transition is profoundly different from the one that existed at the height of the Ice Age. Sea levels are higher. Forests are expanding. The great mammoth ecosystems are fading. Human populations are growing and moving. New opportunities are appearing across newly transformed landscapes. The age of survival within a frozen world is giving way to something new. And as climates stabilize, people begin undertaking journeys that will reshape the human map forever. Entire populations start moving into regions opened by environmental change. Old routes disappear. New ones emerge. The geography of humanity enters another period of transformation. As the younger Dryas fades and warmer conditions return, humanity finds itself standing in a world that is increasingly unfamiliar to its ancestors. The glaciers no longer dominate as they once did. Vast regions previously buried beneath ice have opened. Forests spread across enormous territories. Rivers establish new courses. Coastlines continue their slow retreat inland. Animal populations reorganize themselves across changing habitats. And people move. They move because they always have. Migration is one of the oldest stories in human history. Long before cities, kingdoms, or written records, human beings survive by following opportunity. They track food sources. They seek favorable climates. They explore unfamiliar landscapes. They maintain connections between distant communities. The ending of the Ice Age accelerates many of these processes. Environmental transformation creates both pressures and possibilities. Some regions become less hospitable. Others become far more attractive. The result is a gradual reshaping of the human presence across the planet. The process is not a single migration. It is thousands of migrations. Families relocate. Bands expand into new territories. Communities split and establish separate identities. Groups encounter one another, exchange ideas, compete for resources, and occasionally merge. The map of humanity becomes increasingly dynamic. One of the clearest examples appears in northern regions that were previously inaccessible. As glaciers retreat from Europe and North America, vast new territories emerge: tundra, grassland, forest, wetlands, and lakes develop across landscapes that had long remained hidden beneath ice. People follow. Archaeological evidence reveals human expansion into areas that earlier generations could not occupy. New camps appear. New hunting territories are explored. Resources once locked behind glacial barriers become available. For those making these journeys, the opportunities must have seemed extraordinary. Entire regions stand open. Rivers guide movement. Animals colonize fresh habitats. The land itself invites exploration. Yet migration is never simply about geography. It is also about knowledge. Successful movement requires understanding unfamiliar environments. People must learn new animal behaviors, new plant resources, new weather patterns, and new dangers. Cultural flexibility becomes a tremendous advantage. Groups capable of adapting quickly often thrive. Those less able to adjust may struggle. This adaptability helps explain one of the most remarkable achievements in human history: the peopling of nearly every habitable corner of the globe. By the end of the Ice Age, humans occupy environments ranging from tropical forests to Arctic regions. Few species demonstrate comparable ecological versatility. The changing climate contributes significantly to this success. As conditions improve in certain regions, populations grow. As populations grow, some groups move outward. As they move, they carry technologies, traditions, and knowledge with them. The process creates networks of influence stretching across enormous distances. One fascinating aspect of these migrations involves communication between communities. Even populations separated by considerable distances often maintain indirect connections through chains of exchange and interaction. Materials travel. Ideas travel. Technologies travel. Knowledge travels. A tool-making technique developed in one region may eventually appear hundreds of kilometers away. Decorative styles spread. Social practices evolve. The human world becomes increasingly interconnected. Not interconnected in the modern sense of instant communication, but interconnected nonetheless. Information moves faster than genes. Culture becomes a powerful force shaping human adaptation. The evidence for these networks appears in archaeological sites throughout the post-Ice Age world. Stone tools made from distant materials, shells transported inland, shared artistic traditions, similar technological innovations appearing across broad regions. These clues reveal people who are far from isolated. Instead, they inhabit social landscapes extending well beyond local territories. Environmental change encourages this connectivity. When conditions become unpredictable, maintaining relationships with neighboring groups can provide crucial advantages. Information about resources becomes valuable. Knowledge about changing habitats becomes valuable. Access to distant territories becomes valuable. Cooperation enhances resilience. At the same time, changing climates create entirely new ecological frontiers. Across northern Europe, forests continue advancing. Across parts of Asia, expanding habitats attract both animals and humans. Across North America, newly available territories support growing populations. Every newly habitable landscape becomes part of an ongoing human story. Some of the most significant migrations involve coastlines. As rising seas inundate ancient shores, communities relocate repeatedly. The process may unfold gradually, but its cumulative effects are profound. People abandon old territories. They establish new ones farther inland. Generations inherit memories of places that no longer exist. Entire cultural landscapes disappear beneath the ocean. Migration becomes not merely an opportunity but a necessity. The relationship between environmental change and human movement remains a major area of research. Scholars continue debating specific routes, timelines, and demographic patterns. The evidence is often fragmentary. Ancient populations leave traces but not complete records. No single explanation fully accounts for the complexity of human migration. Different regions experience different pressures. Different communities make different choices. Still, certain broad trends are clear. The end of the Ice Age promotes mobility. It opens new lands. It closes old pathways. It redistributes resources. It reshapes opportunities. And humanity responds. One particularly important consequence of these movements is cultural diversity. As populations spread into new environments, local adaptations emerge. Technologies evolve differently. Traditions develop unique characteristics. Languages gradually diverge. The human story becomes increasingly varied. Yet beneath this diversity lies a shared experience. Almost everyone living during this period is adapting to a changing world. Whether occupying forests, grasslands, wetlands, mountains, or coastlines, communities face environmental conditions unlike those known by many of their ancestors. The ability to learn, innovate, and cooperate becomes more important than ever. Over time, some populations begin experimenting with strategies that would have seemed unusual during earlier phases of the Ice Age. Instead of merely harvesting wild resources, people start influencing them. Instead of simply following nature, they begin shaping it. The shift is subtle at first. A preference for certain plants, the encouragement of useful species, the repeated use of particular landscapes. Small actions accumulate across generations. No one realizes it yet, but some communities are taking the first tentative steps toward a transformation even more consequential than the ending of the Ice Age itself. The age of pure hunting and gathering is not ending everywhere, nor will it disappear quickly. But in a few regions, humans are beginning to alter their relationship with the natural world. The landscape is changing, and increasingly, people are changing it too. For most of human history, survival depends upon following nature. People move with the seasons, they track migrating animals, they gather wild plants when conditions allow. The landscape dictates possibilities. Human communities adapt to the rhythms of the natural world rather than controlling them. Yet as the Ice Age recedes further into the past, something subtle begins happening in several parts of the world. Humans start reshaping the environments around them. The transformation is gradual, almost invisible at first. No one announces the beginning of a new age. There is no single invention that changes everything overnight. Instead, countless small decisions accumulate over generations. A group returns repeatedly to the same valley because it contains useful plants. People clear small areas of vegetation. They encourage species they find valuable. They harvest selectively. They alter local ecosystems without fully intending to. Over time, the boundary between natural landscape and human-managed landscape becomes increasingly blurred. This process emerges in different forms across different regions. The details vary enormously, but the underlying pattern is similar. As climates become more stable following the end of the Younger Dryas, opportunities for longer-term occupation increase. Stability changes everything. For thousands of years, many Ice Age populations live within environments characterized by dramatic fluctuations. Conditions shift, habitats move, resources change, flexibility remains essential. Now, in many places, seasonal patterns become more predictable. The Holocene begins. This relatively warm and stable climatic period will last for thousands of years and provide the environmental backdrop for all recorded civilization. The importance of that stability is difficult to overstate. Stable climates allow plants to flourish consistently in certain regions. Animal populations become more predictable. Water systems settle into recognizable patterns. Landscapes stop transforming quite so dramatically from century to century. Human communities respond. In some areas, people begin spending longer periods in favored locations. Settlements become more substantial. Storage becomes more important. Knowledge accumulates about particular environments. Instead of constantly moving through vast territories, some groups concentrate their efforts in specific places. The Near East provides one of the most famous examples. Long before full-scale agriculture emerges, communities in parts of this region increasingly exploit wild cereals such as wheat and barley. People gather these resources in significant quantities. Grinding stones appear. Storage facilities become more common. What survives in the archaeological record suggests a growing familiarity with particular plant species and seasonal cycles. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate the exact sequence of developments. Human behavior rarely follows a simple linear path. Different communities experiment with different strategies. Yet the overall trend is unmistakable. People are becoming more deeply engaged with the management of resources. The shift extends beyond plants. Animals are affected as well. Human hunting influences animal populations. Repeated occupation alters local habitats. Fire is sometimes used to modify vegetation patterns. The landscape increasingly reflects human choices. One fascinating detail is that many environments often regarded as entirely natural may already bear traces of prehistoric management. indigenous communities around the world have long influenced ecosystems through burning, harvesting, selective cultivation, and other practices. The distinction between wilderness and human landscape is not always clear. Even before agriculture and people shape nature, the scale simply becomes larger over time. Climate plays an important role in enabling these developments. As glaciers disappear and ecosystems stabilize, productivity increases in many regions. More plants grow, more animals thrive. Resources become available in concentrated and predictable forms. This abundance supports population growth. Growing populations create new pressures. More people require more food. More food encourages experimentation. Experimentation produces innovation. The cycle reinforces itself, yet this process is neither inevitable nor universal. Many hunter-gatherer societies continue flourishing without adopting agriculture. Some remain highly mobile. Others establish complex social systems while relying primarily on wild resources. The old ways do not simply vanish. In fact, many prove remarkably successful. The emergence of environmental management represents an addition to the human toolkit rather than an immediate replacement for earlier strategies. This diversity is important. There is no single path through history. Different societies respond to changing conditions in different ways. Some become increasingly sedentary. Others remain mobile. Some intensify their use of plants. Others focus on fishing, hunting, or mixed economies. Human adaptation remains flexible. What unites these various developments is a changing relationship between people and place. During the height of the Ice Age, landscapes often dictate human movement. Now, increasingly, humans begin influencing landscapes. The balance is shifting. A settlement occupied year after year develops its own history. Trails become established. Useful plants are encouraged. Local knowledge deepens. Generations build upon the decisions of those who came before. Memory becomes anchored to specific locations. The emotional geography of human life changes as well. A place is no longer merely somewhere visited seasonally. It becomes home. This concept carries enormous significance. Permanent or semi-permanent attachment to place encourages investment in local resources. It rewards long-term planning. It strengthens social continuity. The consequences will echo through every future civilization. Archaeologists studying the period often encounter evidence of communities that seem poised between worlds. They retain many characteristics of hunter-gatherers while simultaneously displaying traits associated with later agricultural societies. They are experimenters, innovators, adapters, people responding creatively to opportunities created by a warming and stabilizing planet. None of them know where the process will lead. No one predicts cities. No one predicts empires. No one predicts writing, mathematics, monumental architecture, or global trade networks. Those developments remain far in the future, yet some of their foundations are quietly taking shape. The end of the Ice Age has created environmental conditions unlike those experienced during earlier millennia. Stable seasons, predictable resources, and expanding ecosystems provide new possibilities. Humans begin exploring them. The transformation remains incomplete. Agriculture has not yet fully arrived. Civilization has not yet emerged. But the relationship between humanity and nature is changing in a profound way. For thousands of generations, people adapt primarily to the world they inherit. Now, slowly and unevenly, they begin adapting the world to themselves. And from that subtle shift will emerge one of the most revolutionary developments in human history. The birth of farming. The invention of farming is often imagined as a moment, a discovery, a sudden realization that changes human history forever. The reality is far more gradual, far more complicated, and in many ways far more fascinating. No single individual invents agriculture. No village awakens one morning transformed from hunter-gatherers into farmers. Instead, the process unfolds across centuries and millennia, emerging from countless experiments, observations, failures, and adaptations. It develops independently in several regions of the world, under different circumstances and involving different plants and animals. Yet beneath this diversity lies a shared connection to the environmental transformation that followed the end of the Ice Age. The stable climate of the Holocene creates opportunities that rarely existed during the wild fluctuations of the glacial world. For generations, people have been observing nature closely. They understand seasonal cycles. They know when certain plants produce seeds. They recognize fertile soils. They notice patterns in growth and reproduction. This knowledge accumulates. Eventually, in some places, observation turns into intervention. Seeds are deliberately scattered. Useful plants are protected. Competing vegetation is removed. Harvesting becomes more systematic. Generation by generation, the relationship between humans and plants begins changing. The Near East provides one of the earliest and best-known examples. In regions stretching across parts of modern Southwest Asia, communities increasingly rely upon wild cereals. Over time, certain varieties become favored. Human harvesting exerts subtle evolutionary pressure. Plants with characteristics advantageous to cultivation become more common. Without realizing it, people and plants begin reshaping one another. Domestication is not a one-sided process. Humans change crops. Crops change humans. A wild grass that once grows only in scattered patches becomes the foundation of entire societies. The transformation is extraordinary. Wheat and barley are not simply food sources. They become engines of social change. Because cultivated plants can produce substantial yields, communities can support larger populations. Because harvest can be stored, food becomes available beyond the season of collection. Because food can be accumulated, entirely new forms of economic and social organization become possible. The implications unfold gradually, yet they are profound. Meanwhile, similar processes occur elsewhere. In East Asia, different crops become important. Rice and millet follow their own domestication pathways. In the Americas, maize, beans, squash, and other species eventually emerge as agricultural foundations. In New Guinea, local environmental conditions support distinctive forms of cultivation. The details differ. The pattern repeats. Human beings are learning to shape ecosystems deliberately. Climate alone does not explain this development. Scholars remain careful about drawing overly simple connections between environmental stability and agricultural origins. No single explanation fully accounts for the emergence of farming. Cultural traditions matter. Population pressures matter. Technological innovations matter. Local ecological conditions matter. Human creativity matters. Yet it is difficult to imagine these transformations occurring in exactly the same way without the post-Ice Age world that makes them possible. The Holocene provides a stage upon which new experiments can succeed. Agriculture changes more than food production. It changes time itself. Hunter-gatherers often organize life around seasonal movement and resource availability. Farmers begin organizing life around planting, tending, and harvesting cycles. Calendars become increasingly important. Long-term planning becomes essential. The future matters in new ways. Seeds planted today may not produce food for months. Fields require maintenance. Storage requires protection. Success depends upon patience and foresight. These demands reshape societies. Villages become larger. Permanent structures become more common. Population densities increase. Communities invest in specific locations. Home acquires a different meaning. Archaeological evidence reveals settlements growing in both size and complexity. Houses become more substantial. Storage facilities expand. Social relationships evolve. Some of these early communities would appear surprisingly familiar in certain respects. Families occupy durable dwellings. People maintain local traditions. Children grow up within stable settlements. Generations remain connected to particular landscapes. The mobility that characterized much of Ice Age life begins diminishing in some regions. Yet agriculture brings challenges as well as benefits. This is one of history's important ironies. The development often celebrated as progress introduces new vulnerabilities. Farmers become dependent upon crops. Crop failures can be devastating. Communities concentrated in one place may face disease risks unknown to smaller mobile groups. Social inequalities may emerge as resources accumulate unevenly. Environmental damage can result from intensive land use. Agriculture creates possibilities. It also creates problems. The transition is not universally attractive. For many people, hunting, gathering, fishing, and mixed subsistence strategies remain successful for thousands of years. Some societies adopt agriculture slowly, others resist it entirely. Different approaches coexist across vast regions. History remains diverse. Still, the long-term trend becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Agricultural communities often support larger populations. Larger populations create greater social complexity. Greater complexity encourages specialization. Specialization fosters innovation. The cycle accelerates. One particularly important consequence involves surplus. For most of human history, survival requires continuous effort directed toward obtaining food. Agricultural systems capable of producing reliable surpluses free some individuals from direct food production. Not everyone must hunt. Not everyone must gather. Not everyone must farm. Some people become artisans. Some become traders. Some become religious specialists. Some become administrators. Entirely new social roles emerge. The foundations of civilization are quietly assembling themselves. The process remains uneven and incomplete. Thousands of years will pass before the first cities arise. Yet the direction is becoming clearer. The environmental changes triggered by the end of the Ice Age have created conditions in which increasingly complex societies can flourish. Rivers stabilize. Floodplains accumulate fertile soils. Growing seasons become predictable. Population centers expand. Human influence on landscapes intensifies. The relationship between people and nature is changing more rapidly than ever before. What began with melting glaciers and rising temperatures is now reshaping human existence itself. The world of mammoth hunters fades into memory. The world of villages, fields, and stored harvests emerges. And as agricultural communities grow larger and more interconnected, another transformation begins. For the first time in history, some human settlements will become large enough, wealthy enough, and complex enough to evolve into something entirely new. Cities. The first cities do not rise because someone decides to build civilization. They emerge from thousands of years of accumulated change. Every field planted, every harvest stored, every village expanded, every pathway established across a landscape contributes something to the process. The transformation is so gradual that the people living through it would rarely perceive its full significance. Yet from the perspective of deep time, a remarkable threshold is being crossed. For almost all of human existence, communities remain relatively small. Bands become tribes. Villages appear. Settlements grow. But eventually, in a few fortunate regions, populations reach a scale never seen before. The conditions that make this possible are rooted in the post-Ice Age world. Stable climates support predictable agriculture. Predictable agriculture supports population growth. Population growth encourages specialization. Specialization creates complexity. Complexity generates entirely new forms of social organization. The chain begins with environmental change, but it extends far beyond it. Few places illustrate this transformation more clearly than the great river valleys of the ancient world. The rivers themselves are products of the same climatic and geological forces that have been reshaping the Earth since the glaciers began retreating. Meltwater, changing rainfall patterns, shifting ecosystems, and stabilizing climates help create some of the most fertile regions on the planet. Among the most famous is the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. For thousands of years, sediments carried by these rivers accumulate across broad floodplains. Seasonal flooding replenishes soils, agricultural productivity increases, settlements expand. Eventually, some become cities. A similar pattern appears along the Nile. The river flows through landscapes that would otherwise support far fewer people. Annual flooding enriches agricultural lands. Communities concentrate near dependable water sources. Farther east, major river systems support growing populations in Asia. Different environments produce different outcomes, but the underlying principle remains consistent. Water and stability create opportunity. Opportunity creates complexity. The connection to the end of the Ice Age is not always obvious because so much time has passed. By the time the earliest cities emerge, thousands of years separate them from the retreat of the great ice sheets. Yet the relationship remains real. Without the climatic stability of the Holocene, the agricultural system supporting large urban populations would have faced far greater challenges. Without rising temperatures and changing ecosystems, many fertile regions might never have developed as they did. Civilization is built upon environmental foundations. Those foundations were laid during the Great Transition out of the Ice Age. As settlements grow larger, entirely new forms of life become possible. Trade expands. Goods move between distant regions. Ideas travel alongside them. Technologies spread. Cultural exchange accelerates. The world becomes more connected than ever before. One particularly fascinating development involves specialization. In hunter-gatherer society, most people participate directly in obtaining food. In a city, roles diversify dramatically. Some individuals focus on metalworking. Others become potters. Others build structures. Others organize trade. Others manage religious activities. Still others oversee administration. The complexity of urban life creates opportunities for expertise. Human knowledge becomes increasingly concentrated and refined. Writing eventually emerges in several regions, though not everywhere and not simultaneously. Record-keeping, accounting, administration, and communication become more sophisticated. History, in the conventional sense, begins. Before writing, much of humanity's story survives only through archaeology, genetics, geology, and oral tradition. After writing, people begin leaving their own accounts. The world becomes visible in new ways. Yet even as cities rise, the fingerprints of the Ice Age remain everywhere. Coastlines established by post-glacial sea level rise shape trade routes. River systems influenced by ancient climatic changes support agriculture. Fertile soils derived from glacial deposits sustain populations. The geography inherited from the end of the Ice Age continues directing human development. Modern maps are, in many respects, post-glacial maps. Civilization grows within landscapes created by earlier environmental transformations. This fact is easy to overlook because human achievements often command attention. Monumental architecture, writing systems, political institutions, and technological innovations dominate historical narratives. But beneath every city lies a physical world. Beneath every empire lies a landscape. And landscapes have histories too. The environmental stability of the Holocene proves especially important. For thousands of years, climatic conditions remain relatively favourable compared with the dramatic fluctuations of the late Ice Age. Variability still exists. Droughts occur, floods occur, regional crises emerge. Yet the overall framework remains unusually stable. Agricultural societies flourish within that stability. Population numbers rise dramatically. Trade networks expand across continents. Civilizations emerge, interact, compete, and sometimes collapse. The human world becomes increasingly complex. No single explanation fully accounts for the rise of civilization. Scholars continue debating the relative importance of geography, agriculture, social organization, ideology, trade, conflict, and environmental factors. Human history is never simple. Still, the larger pattern remains compelling. The retreat of the glaciers creates new coastlines. The warming climate reshapes ecosystems. Stable conditions encourage agriculture. Agriculture supports population growth. Population growth enables cities. Cities give rise to civilizations. A chain of events stretches across thousands of years. No individual link guarantees the next. Yet together they form one of the most consequential transformations in Earth's history. The modern world begins taking shape, not in a single place, not through a single invention, but through countless interactions between humans and changing environments. What makes the story especially remarkable is that many people living within the earliest civilizations have little awareness of how recently their world has emerged. To them, rivers seem eternal. Coastlines appear permanent. Forests and fields feel natural. The drowned landscapes of the Ice Age are forgotten. The mammoth hunters belong to a distant and fading past. Yet memory has a curious way of surviving. Even when direct knowledge disappears, echoes sometimes remain. Stories endure, myths persist. Legends travel across generations. And some researchers have wondered whether fragments of humanity's experience during the ending of the Ice Age may still linger within ancient traditions long after the events themselves have vanished from living memory. Human memory is fragile. A single lifetime passes quickly. Even the most vivid experiences fade within a few generations unless they are preserved somehow. Yet cultures possess an unusual ability to carry fragments of the past across astonishing spans of time. Stories change, details shift, meanings evolve, but occasionally, buried beneath layers of symbolism and tradition, there may survive faint echoes of real events. The possibility becomes especially intriguing when considering the end of the Ice Age. Few transformations in human history rival its scale. Glaciers retreat across continents. Sea levels rise by more than 100 meters. Entire coastlines disappear. Land bridges vanish. Ecosystems reorganize. Animal species go extinct. Human populations migrate. The world itself is remade. It would be surprising if such experiences left no cultural traces at all. The challenge, of course, is proving any connection. Ancient myths rarely function as straightforward historical records. They blend memory, belief, symbolism, morality, identity, and imagination. Stories evolve as they pass from one generation to the next. New meanings become attached to old narratives. Separating historical experience from later interpretation is extraordinarily difficult. Scholars therefore approach the subject cautiously. The evidence remains incomplete. Direct links between specific Ice Age events and later traditions are rarely possible to establish with certainty. Yet certain patterns continue attracting attention. Among the most widespread are stories involving floods. Flood narratives appear in many parts of the world. Some describe rising waters that overwhelm entire landscapes. Others tell of survivors escaping destruction and helping rebuild society afterward. The details differ enormously, reflecting local cultures and environments. Some flood traditions become famous through written records preserved by ancient civilizations. Others survive through oral traditions passed down over generations. The existence of these stories does not automatically mean they preserve memories of Ice Age sea level rise. Floods occur frequently in human history. Rivers overflow, storm surges devastate coastlines, tsunamis strike unexpectedly. Local disasters can inspire powerful cultural memories. No single explanation fully accounts for the global distribution of flood narratives. Still, the timing invites curiosity. For thousands of years following the Ice Age, people witness coastlines advancing inland. Familiar landscapes disappear beneath the sea. Entire regions transform. Communities living through such changes may well have created stories to explain what they experienced. Those stories may have persisted long after the original events faded from direct memory. The idea remains speculative, yet it highlights an important truth. Human beings do not simply experience environmental change, they interpret it, they remember it, they weave it into cultural identity. The end of the Ice Age is not merely a geological event, it is a human experience. One particularly interesting area of research involves indigenous oral traditions. In several regions, stories appear to describe coastal landscapes that existed before sea level rise reached its modern position. Some traditions from Australia, for example, have attracted scholarly attention because they may preserve remarkably ancient memories of changing shorelines. The evidence is debated. Dating oral traditions is inherently difficult. Yet the possibility is fascinating. It suggests that cultural memory may sometimes endure far longer than previously assumed. If true, certain stories could represent some of humanity's oldest surviving connections to the post-Ice Age world. Elsewhere, as myths describe lost lands, sunken territories, former homelands now beneath the sea, popular imagination often gravitates towards spectacular interpretations. Tales of vanished continents and advanced prehistoric civilizations frequently emerge in books, documentaries, and internet discussions. Most of these claims lack convincing evidence. Archaeology has uncovered no support for many of the more extravagant proposals. The famous story of Atlantis, for example, originates in the writings of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato and is generally regarded by scholars as a philosophical narrative rather than a historical account of a real Ice Age civilization. Yet the popularity of such stories reveals something important. People intuitively recognize that vast amounts of prehistoric history have disappeared, and they are correct. The lost landscapes of the Ice Age were real. Doggerland was real. Beringia was real. Sunderland was real. The drowned plains beneath modern seas were real. Millions of people throughout history have likely lived in places now hidden beneath water. Acknowledging this reality does not require invoking lost super-civilizations or unsupported theories. The actual story is already extraordinary. The oceans conceal enormous chapters of human history. Future discoveries may reveal much more. Advances in underwater archaeology continue expanding our understanding of submerged landscapes. Sonar mapping, sediment analysis, and underwater exploration are opening new windows into worlds that disappeared thousands of years ago. Each discovery adds detail to a story that remains incomplete. The hidden past is slowly resurfacing. At the same time, myths and traditions remind us that human responses to environmental change are never purely practical. People seek meaning. When landscapes disappear, communities create stories. When disasters occur, they search for explanations. When the world changes, memory becomes a way of preserving continuity. This impulse connects ancient people to modern ones. The same psychological tendencies that inspired myths in prehistory continue shaping human behavior today. We remain storytellers. And perhaps that is one reason the ending of the Ice Age continues to capture imagination so powerfully. It is not merely a scientific narrative. It is a story about loss, about adaptation, about survival, about worlds disappearing and new worlds emerging. The people who witnessed these transformations were not fundamentally different from us. They worried about their families. They observed nature. They adapted to uncertainty. They remembered what they could. And although much of their world has vanished, traces remain. In stories, in landscapes, in archaeological sites, in ancient shorelines hidden beneath the sea, and perhaps most remarkably, in the very shape of the modern world itself. Because the ending of the Ice Age is not merely a chapter in the distant past. Its consequences surround us every day. Every modern map is, in a sense, an Ice Age artifact. The coastlines people learn in school, the locations of major rivers, the distribution of forests and grasslands, the placement of fertile agricultural regions, even the routes along which civilizations emerged, all of them bear the imprint of events that began when the great glaciers started to retreat. The ending of the Ice Age is not a story that concluded thousands of years ago. It is a story still visible all around us. Its fingerprints are everywhere. Look at the shape of northern Europe. The countless lakes scattered across Finland, the deep fjords cutting into the coast of Norway, the fertile plains formed by glacial deposits. The landscapes themselves are products of ancient ice. Travel across Canada and the legacy becomes even more obvious. Vast lake systems occupy basins shaped by glaciers. Ancient shorelines mark the edges of long-vanished bodies of water. Entire ecosystems exist because of geological processes set in motion during deglaciation. The Great Lakes are among the most dramatic examples. Today they contain roughly 1/5 of the world's surface freshwater. They support major cities, transportation networks, industries, and ecosystems. Yet their origins lie in the retreat of the Laurentide ice sheet. Without that retreat, the geography of North America would be profoundly different. The same principle applies across the globe. The modern Baltic Sea owes its existence to post-glacial processes. The English Channel reflects changing sea levels and shifting landscapes. The Persian Gulf occupies a basin transformed by rising waters. Modern coastlines around Southeast Asia emerge from the drowning of Sunderland. Again and again, the present world reveals its connection to the end of the Ice Age. Even the distribution of human populations reflects these ancient transformations. Many of today's largest cities occupy coastal regions established by post-glacial sea level rise. Major agricultural zones often depend upon fertile soils created by glacial or post-glacial processes. Transportation corridors follow landscapes shaped by events thousands of years old. The modern world rests upon foundations built during deep time. This realization changes how history is viewed. Human achievements remain extraordinary. Cities, civilizations, technologies, cultures, and institutions deserve their place in the story. Yet beneath them lies a deeper narrative. Before there could be civilizations, there had to be suitable environments. Before there could be agriculture, there had to be stable climates. Before there could be stable climates, There had to be an end to the great glacial world. The chain stretches backward through time, and it reminds us that humanity does not stand apart from nature. Human history and environmental history are intertwined. The relationship continues today. One reason scientists devote so much attention to the end of the Ice Age is that it provides a natural laboratory for understanding large-scale climate change. Researchers examine ice cores, sediments, fossils, pollen records, cave deposits, and countless other sources of evidence to reconstruct how Earth responded to dramatic environmental shifts. The lessons are valuable because they reveal both resilience and vulnerability. Ecosystems adapt. Species migrate. Landscapes transform. Yet disruptions can also be profound. Habitats disappear. Populations decline. Entire species vanish. The extinction of the mammoth serves as a reminder that environmental change can reshape the biological world in irreversible ways. The flooding of Doggerland demonstrates how rising seas can alter human geography. The Younger Dryas reveals that climate systems can behave unexpectedly. The story of the Ice Age is not simply a tale of warming. It is a tale of complexity. One of the most striking aspects of the transition is how interconnected everything becomes. A slight change in Earth's orbit influences climate. Climate affects glaciers. Glaciers influence sea levels. Sea levels reshape coastlines. Coastlines alter migration routes. Migration affects cultures. Cultures develop agriculture. Agriculture enables cities. Cities give rise to civilizations. The chain extends across thousands of years, linking seemingly unrelated events into a single unfolding story. No individual living through the end of the Ice Age could have understood the full consequences of what was happening. A hunter watching a glacier retreat from a distant valley would not foresee the rise of ancient kingdoms. A family relocating from a flooded shoreline would not imagine future ports, trade empires, and global economies. A child growing up beside a newly formed lake would not anticipate the cities that would eventually surround similar waters. History often works this way. The most important transformations begin quietly. Their significance becomes visible only much later. The ending of the Ice Age may be the ultimate example. Its influence reaches into nearly every aspect of the modern world, yet most people rarely think about it. Coastlines appear permanent, rivers seem timeless, agricultural landscapes feel natural, nations and cities dominate attention. The deeper environmental foundations fade into the background, but they remain. Every harbour exists because of geological history. Every fertile valley reflects ancient environmental processes. Every forest, grassland, wetland, and coastline carries traces of past climates. The world around us is not merely a setting for human history. It is one of its creators, and perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The end of the Ice Age did not simply remove glaciers from the landscape. It created possibilities. It opened pathways. It generated opportunities. It transformed ecosystems. It reshaped continents. It altered the trajectory of our species. The modern world is not separate from that transformation. It is the result of it. Thousands of years have passed since mammoths roamed across the great northern plains. The hidden continents beneath today's seas have vanished. The immense glaciers have largely retreated, yet their legacy remains visible in every direction. The world we know was born from their disappearance. As daylight fades across a modern coastline, it is easy to forget how young that shoreline really is. The waves roll in with a rhythm that feels eternal. Harbours glow with city lights. Roads follow familiar routes. People move through landscapes that appear stable and permanent. Yet beneath the surface lies a much longer story. Not long ago, in the scale of geological time, Many of these places did not exist in their present form. The sea stood elsewhere. The rivers followed different courses. The forests occupied different boundaries. Entire worlds stretched across land now hidden beneath water. The ending of the Ice Age reminds us that permanence is often an illusion. Mountains endure, but glaciers come and go. Coastlines advance and retreat. Species flourish and disappear. Human societies rise, transform, and sometimes vanish. Change is one of the deepest constants in Earth's history. And yet there is another lesson hidden within that change. Again and again, life adapts. Plants colonize newly exposed ground. Animals follow shifting habitats. Human beings learn, adjust, innovate, and survive. The people who lived through the end of the Ice Age faced a world in motion. They watched rivers grow, forests spread, coastlines retreat, and familiar landscapes disappear. They experienced uncertainty on a scale few generations had known before. Yet they endured. From their adaptability emerged new possibilities. From those possibilities came agriculture. From agriculture came villages. From villages came cities. And from cities came much of the world we recognize today. The story began with ice, but it became a story about transformation. A story about how environmental change and human ingenuity became intertwined. A story about landscapes shaping civilizations, and civilizations shaping landscapes in return. Somewhere beneath the waters of the North Sea, the remains of Doggerland still rest in darkness. Beneath the Persian Gulf lie traces of ancient valleys. Beneath countless coastal waters around the world are the submerged fragments of forgotten human journeys. The oceans keep their secrets well, but enough evidence survives to glimpse the outlines of those vanished worlds. And when we do, the present begins to look different. Modern coastlines become recent arrivals. Ancient myths acquire new dimensions. Ordinary landscapes reveal extraordinary histories. The earth itself becomes a record of memory. So the next time you stand beside a river, look across a fertile plain, or watch the horizon from a shoreline. It is worth remembering that these places are not merely scenery. They are the latest chapter in a story still unfolding. A story written in ice and water, in migration and survival, in disappearance and renewal. A story that began long before civilization. A story whose consequences continue to shape every map on Earth. And as the light fades and the tide slowly rises against the shore, the ancient world lingers just beyond sight, hidden beneath the waters, waiting quietly beneath the modern world it helped create.